Cool. All right. And we are live on Facebook. So we're just going to start welcoming everyone as people filter into the program. Thank you for coming to our second official program of Mental Health and Trauma Informed Awareness Month. Today, we're so excited to have the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness doing not one, but two programs with us this month. And today we have Katie Mittelstaedt. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. We have Dr. Katie Mittelstaedt here, and she is going to be doing a program with us on intuitive eating, health at every size, and body acceptance. We also have an ASL interpreter on this Zoom. So if you are in need of those services, she's here. We also have live captioning at the bottom of this screen, and to additionally help anyone who needs that accommodation. Throughout the program, Katie is going to be presenting different information on these topics. If at any time you have a question, or if you just want to share a comment, you can use either the chat or the Q&A feature. And then at the end of the program, we're going to cut off the Facebook Live just a little bit early and have a Q&A session with people on the Zoom itself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie. Thanks and welcome.
Thank you, Maddie. Hi, everyone. As Maddie said, my name is Dr. Katie Mittelstaedt, and I'm from the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness. And today I'm going to be talking about intuitive eating, health at every size, and body acceptance. And I'm going to start by talking for just a few minutes about the Alliance. And as I do that, if you are here with me in the webinar, I would love if you would be willing to introduce yourself in the chat function and let me know why you're here, what you're hoping to get out of this webinar, why this interests you, because I would love to make sure that I am speaking to any particular interest that you have. And so if you'd be willing to do that, I would certainly appreciate it and enjoy getting to know you via chat as we can. And so I'll go ahead and start just for a few minutes talking about where I come from and the work that we do. So I work at the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness, known as the Alliance. And we're a national nonprofit organization, and we do a lot of programs and activities aimed at outreach, education like this, and early intervention for all eating disorders. And we have a few services that I'd love for you to know about. One of them is findedhelp.com. We have the nation's largest database for finding eating disorder treatment providers and treatment centers. So if you or someone you know may be experiencing an eating disorder, I'd really encourage you to look at Find ED Help. You can find therapists, dietitians, medical providers who specialize in the treatment of eating disorders. And if you prefer to speak with somebody directly, we also have a toll-free helpline. So you could call and speak with a licensed clinician and get information, education, or a referral to treatment. And the phone number is listed right here. Another service that we provide at the Alliance is weekly virtual therapist-led support groups. We offer 2 weekly support groups on Mondays and Saturdays. They're pro-recovery for individuals experiencing eating disorders. We also offer an LGBTQ+ pro-recovery group on Wednesdays, and a support group for friends and family of loved ones who are currently experiencing eating disorders. And that's on Wednesdays. I'll actually be there tonight. So if you are experiencing eating disorder, think you might be experiencing eating disorder, just wonder, or think a friend or a family member or loved one might be, I encourage you to check those things out. Another service we provide at the Alliance is psychological services, which is where I work, where we provide therapy, outpatient treatment to folks who are experiencing eating disorders and who can't afford treatment in the community due to being uninsured or underinsured. Most of my patients pay $5 to $25 a session, and we don't limit the number of sessions that we can see people. We treat to outcome. So again, if you live in this area or know someone who lives in this area, I really encourage you to reach out if you need help. Now we'll go ahead and transition into the presentation. This presentation isn't about eating disorders specifically, so it's for all of us. It's really around how do we develop a healthy, trusting relationship with food and with our bodies. So if you'd be willing to, I'd love for you to take a moment to reflect on some of the different messages you've received growing up around food, eating, body size, body shape. Did you learn that certain foods were good? Certain foods were bad? This is very common. Did your family maybe have rules around food, like no eating after 7 p.m. or no snacking between meals? Were there spoken or other unspoken rules around food or the kind of body we should have? Because today I'm gonna speak to an alternative perspective to living life around food rules, which is something called intuitive eating. What is intuitive eating? This is an approach that teaches us how to create a truly healthy relationship with our food, with our minds, and with our body. Intuitive eating approach believes that our bodies have a lot more wisdom than we give them credit for when it comes to knowing when to eat, how much to eat. And the goal of intuitive eating is to become the expert of your own body. That we're not looking necessarily to experts outside of us, outside of maybe, dietitians who are helping us with a specific allergy or food issue, but that we can trust ourselves with food. Intuitive eating helps us to develop an internal compass that guides our eating behavior and helps us feel our personal best. So again, rather than having all those outside, this influencer tells me I should eat this, or this book tells me I should eat that. Intuitive eating is all about developing an internal compass that guides our eating behaviors to help us feel our personal, individual best. And is about rejecting the diet mentality in favor of learning how to listen to or relearning how to listen to our internal body cues. And this comes from the idea that study after study in the academic research shows that we are born intuitive eaters. Study after study shows that if we give toddlers access to a variety of foods and enough food, that although their eating may look chaotic at one particular meal, they naturally and intuitively meet all of their nutrition needs over time. And so intuitive eating we really believe that it's the introduction of food rules that most of us get from our families or from the media, from wider culture, that kind of disrupts this natural relationship that we have with our body's natural cues. For example, maybe we learn growing up that we have to clean our plate and not listen to our fullness signals. Or we learn a good way to cope with our emotions is to eat this or eat that. Or something in the media tells us we shouldn't look a certain way. And we stop tuning in and listening to our body's intuitive cues. And this really erodes our trust of our bodies and our abilities to self-regulate. Some of the other things that can inhibit intuitive eating as a practice include comments from parents or caregivers. If like so many of us, you received comments growing up about, you're eating that much or you're eating that. What did that teach you? Maybe that you couldn't trust your fullness signals or your hunger signals. Could be conversation about dieting, restriction, those foods are bad, those foods are good. Self-silence of your own thoughts and feelings. And then we can't ignore culture and our exposure to things like weight stigma and diet culture. So intuitive eating is, like I said, a radically different approach to the one that we come to see often every day in the media and in more general culture. And intuitive eating is an approach developed by 2 registered dietitians and certified eating disorder specialist dietitians, Elise Reich and Evelyn Triboli. And it's based on these 10 principles that we're going to talk about today. And so we can't talk about intuitive eating without talking about diets. And so, like, you just think about, all the messages that we get from diets. One diet might say, oh, the healthiest way to eat is vegan or vegetarian, eat fruit, eat, whole grains. And then another diet goes, no, that's not right. You need to only eat paleo, only eat meat, avoid carbohydrates. And that can leave us going, what are we supposed to do? How am I supposed to eat? Again, all of these outside cues telling us what is right. And often this diet mentality can lead to what's called the cycle of dieting, which is we feel like we need to go on a diet, I need to lose weight, we get these messages, or I need to change the way I eat. And so we end up restricting certain types of foods or how much we eat, counting calories, or swearing off certain foods or certain food groups. I'll never eat that again. And then, because we're human, we feel deprived. And if we're restricting certain nutrients or calorie amounts, there's a biological component of we are deprived. And so we have cravings, increased hunger, can't stop thinking about food, and start to feel really out of control around food, which then results in overeating or binge eating, or what we call the Last Supper mentality. This is the last time I'm ever going to eat sugar. And so I'm just going to go crazy on it. And then we feel guilt and shame. I failed. I'm not good enough. I have a lack of willpower. So what's the solution? Well, I guess I need to go on another diet. And then the cycle starts all over again. And this can be a really vicious cycle and one that can be really hard to get out of without help. And as a result of the diet cycle, we see something called yo-yoing, where we start off at our body's natural set point weight, which is the place where genetically our bodies just like to be in terms of our weight. And then we go on that first diet and we lose some weight. And then we get pulled into that cycle where we naturally are driven to eat more. And then we end up gaining weight. And the research shows that most of the time we end up gaining more weight than we lost. And our body finds a new set point that's a little bit higher than before. And then people go, oh no, I need to lose weight again. So they go on another diet and then they lose a little bit of weight. And then because of that natural biological response, they end up gaining more weight back and have an even higher set point than before. And this is why so often for so many of us, dieting can be so frustrating because it does set us up to fail. So the first principle of intuitive eating is rejecting the diet mentality. It's recognizing the futility of dieting. Diets don't work. And that they also create distrust within ourselves. They teach us not to trust ourselves. Research also shows that people who diet more have decreased self-esteem. It impacts metabolism and our cognitive processes, how well we think. We also see increases in depression, isolation, and even some pretty big, scary consequences like higher risk of premature death and heart disease. And one of the ways you can kind of notice, am I having more of a dieting mentality or more of a non-diet mentality, is to pause and think about what are the questions you ask yourself before eating. Because dieters often think, do I deserve to eat it? They can view food as the enemy. Or they look back at their day of eating and think, well, that was a good day, or that was a bad day. Or if I eat a bad food, I need to make up for it. Feel guilty. Whereas the non-diet mentality really encourages us to think about, am I hungry? Is this going to be satisfying? Does it taste good? Is this radical idea that we deserve to eat without guilt? The second principle of intuitive eating is honoring your hunger. And this here is a hunger scale, which is used to look at how hungry or full am I based on the cues my body is giving me and how satisfied I feel. And so part of learning to eat intuitively is learning to honor your hunger, to feel your fullness, and my favorite part, discover the satisfaction factor, which is learning to choose foods that will satisfy what you want and what your body needs. It's about tuning in, eating slowly, tuning into your senses, stopping eating when we're comfortable and satiated. And very important, in order to stop eating when we're comfortable and satiated, we have to give our selves permission and know you can eat again when you're hungry to satisfy your needs. And I do want to pause here to acknowledge that this also assumes that we have access to enough food and to foods we prefer and like. So I want to recognize that for those of us who don't necessarily have that access, intuitive eating has additional challenges. And I want to take a moment to recognize that too. Another element of intuitive eating is making peace with food, which is, again, kind of a radical idea in diet culture, but it's giving yourself unconditional permission to eat whatever you want. Removing rules and limitations around food. And the reason that we do this is when we allow ourselves to eat what we want, it turns down the allure, the kind of out of control feeling that people can have when they're eating something that they don't usually allow themselves to have. One way that I kind of think about this is if you have ever had a really new, fun best friend or romantic partner, and when you first are meeting them and spending time with them, you can't get enough of them. And if they're a romantic partner, maybe your heart just flutters every time they're around. And then when maybe you've been together with your partner for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you still love them. But it's not this uncontrollable, can't get enough anymore. The same thing with food. When we don't give ourselves permission to eat, true permission to eat, we have that, I have to get it while it's here. When we give ourselves that unconditional permission to eat, it becomes normalized. So legalizing food is critical to changing our relationship with food because it frees us to respond to our inner signals. And I will recognize and hold space that this is for many people the scariest part of intuitive eating. Because most people who hear this go, if I eat whatever I want, I'm never going to stop eating. And I'll say, what about if you can think back to a time when, like a Thanksgiving dinner, and you were so excited to eat and felt like you couldn't stop eating. But then by the third or fourth day of leftovers, you're like, oh, I never want to see this again. That's why intuitive eating works and legalizing food works, is because it does turn down that sense of I'll never be able to get this again. When your body learns over time, no, I really can have it when I want it. When you don't truly believe that you can eat whatever food you like, you will continue to feel deprived, ultimately overeat, and be blocked from feeling satisfied with your eating, which is why legalizing food is essential. And I'm going to talk, sorry, my screen's freezing a little bit. I'm going to talk now about challenging the food police. Oh, I have a question really quick in the chat here. What about your limiter? Like when you feel full with your eating? If I understand this question correctly, intuitive eating definitely promotes stopping eating when you feel full and satisfied. Absolutely honor your hunger and your fullness signals. Intuitive eating also says that when we let ourselves eat what we want, it's much easier to stop when we're full because we trust ourselves and we trust that we can have it again later when we're hungry. And feel free to chat some more if that doesn't answer that question. So another principle of intuitive eating is challenging the food police, which is our kind of fun label that we put that kind of critical voice in our heads. That's like, oh, don't eat that. That's a bad food. With intuitive eating, again, unless you have an allergy, unless you have a medical reason to not eat something, there's no good or bad foods. I tell my clients, it's not a bad food unless you stole it, in which case you should probably give it back. Another principle is coping with your feelings and honoring your feelings without using food. Asking ourselves, am I biologically hungry? What am I feeling? Taking a moment to pause and name our feelings and naming what we need. Because a very normal and understandable and adaptable way we often soothe ourselves when we have big emotions is to get something to eat. And people might label themselves as emotional eaters. And so recognizing that that's a normal, adaptable response, and part of intuitive eating is going, okay, what other ways can I get my needs met? How can I honor my feelings in some other ways too? Can I speak up for what I need and ask for help? So we're going to talk a little bit about what happens. How come we learn not to trust our bodies? Is the media to blame? And so just taking a moment to think about all of the messages that we get every single day about dieting, diet culture, having to change our bodies to look a certain way. Bodies the media gives about larger bodies, or messages the media gives about larger bodies. That it's incredibly normal and understandable to say, I can't trust my body. It needs to look a certain way. And also thinking about how we have had a rise in the quote fitness influencers, community influencers, hashtags that post and promote diets or quote healthy eating and exercise plans. And when we talk about intuitive eating and health at every size, we also want to take a step back and say, how could this be detrimental to your or someone's health and overall well-being? The research indicates that individuals who see more workout posts in their feeds, in their social media, are more likely to feel concerned about their bodies. Posts that are supposed to be fitness motivation often encourage viewers to participate in potentially harmful behavior, and it's promoted as healthy. And a lot of times we have individuals or influencers who aren't actually qualified to give guidance related to nutrition and physical health. So there's often this disconnect. Are they encouraging us to be healthy? truly the healthiest version of us? Or healthy in one very narrow way? There's also some other potential harmful effects of wellness trends. For example, the trend right now of, quote, clean eating. This can be really problematic because it's a really ambiguous term. Kind of beckons back to what I said earlier about how there's messages of you should eat this way, and then there's very conflicting messages of no, you should eat the complete opposite. They're ambiguous. They leave us up for interpretation. And feelings of distress and panic often can arise when food is not presumed to be clean enough because of a lot of these wellness trends. They're often also very restrictive. What wellness trends on social media prescribe isn't enough to meet an adult's caloric needs. We often see this being a precursor for something called orthorexia nervosa, which is an obsession with purity and cleanliness of food, and can lead to malnutrition, cardiac complications, social isolation, and more. So we see that a lot of messaging around quote unquote wellness or health is actually quite the opposite. Which brings us again to another perhaps radically different perspective, which is rather than insisting on changing our bodies, moving towards a place of respecting our bodies. Body respect basic premises include all bodies deserve to be fed. All bodies deserve to be treated with dignity. All bodies deserve to be dressed comfortably and in a manner in which you're accustomed. All bodies deserve to be touched affectionately and with respect. And all bodies deserve to move comfortably. And if respecting your body is a challenge for you, one thing I would encourage you to try out is taking a moment to ask yourself, what has your body helped you to do today? Or make an ongoing list of some of the things your body has done or can do, completely aside from appearance. This can serve as a constant reminder to help you move from body shaming, which is, again, a very common response to social media and influencer and wellness trends, to body acceptance. This is also where I want to talk for a few minutes about health at every size, which is a philosophy that we at the Alliance believe in that promotes overall well-being as a measure of health, not just the number on the scale. Health at every size accepts and respects that there's diversity in body shapes and sizes, that we genetically are going to look different, and that body size is not often an accurate indication of health. Health at every size teaches weight inclusivity, which again is this idea that there is natural diversity of body shapes and sizes, and that's a good thing. It rejects the idea of pathologizing, saying this body is bad or this weight is bad, or idealizing this body is good or this weight is good. Health at every size is also promotes health enhancement. It takes a step back to say there's so much more that contributes to our health than our weight. Like, do we have access to the foods we want and need, right? Do we have access to medical care? Are there supportive health policies for us? There's so much more than just our weight that contributes to our health. Health at every size also asks for respectful care, acknowledging our biases and working to end discrimination based on weight. We also talk about eating for well-being. This is where intuitive eating comes in. Eating based on hunger, satiety, which is like satisfaction. nutritional needs, and pleasure, and life-enhancing movement that people of all sizes, abilities, and interests, we support them in engaging in enjoyable movement to the degree that they choose and find joy. Health at Every Size also recognizes that BMI, which is one of the most commonly referred to measures of health or supposed measures of health, is only one factor to consider when assessing someone's health. In reality, to determine if excess weight is a health risk, there needs to be a lot more assessment done than just someone's BMI or weight and height. The Body Mass Index, BMI, is a screening tool, which means it can't diagnose anything. It's just one measure to assess risk for developing certain medical conditions. And unfortunately, it doesn't factor in genetics. It doesn't differentiate between muscle mass and fat mass. The more muscle you have, the higher your BMI is going to be. Doesn't mean you're unhealthy. It doesn't consider bone density, which changes as we age. It doesn't consider body frame. Some of us just have smaller body frames. Some of us have larger body frames. Normal body diversity. And the larger the frame, the greater the BMI is going to be. BMI doesn't factor in gender. Doesn't factor in nutrition and movement. In short, BMI doesn't determine health. So, kind of bringing some of these things all together. How do we take what we've talked about today and develop a more positive body image, build self-esteem? A few recommendations here. First one would be get off of offending media if you can. If you follow people on social media who promote wellness standards that aren't healthy for you, get off of it, unfollow them. Avoid media that makes you feel bad about your body or about yourself. And on the flip side, seek out media that reinforces positive self-image, that reinforces body diversity, that reinforces there is so much more to you and your health than your body size. Avoid conversations about appearance if this is a difficult area for you. Make a conscious effort to stop body comparison. And last, practice self-care. Can't drink from an empty cup. And some suggestions here to promote better body esteem for every body, better self-esteem. Never joke or shame anyone because of their weight or size. It's never funny and it's never okay. Raise your own and others' consciousness about the fact that we do live in a culture that has biases regarding thinness. And it doesn't mean thin is necessarily healthier. And remember that there is no ideal body. Beautiful bodies and healthy bodies come in all shapes and sizes. And, going back to our health at every size too, there's so much more that impacts health than our body size. There's no wrong way to have a body. So, I know I went kind of fast here, so we'll have lots of time for Q&A. But if you have any questions about any of this, if what I talked about today kind of caused you to pause and to think, wow, maybe I have some concerns about my relationship with food and body, or somebody I know I'm concerned about, again, I would really encourage you to reach out to the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness. Our phone number and website and email are all right here. And I would love if anybody has any questions, if we could pop them in the Q&A.
As Katie said, if you have any questions, you can either use the chat feature or you can use the Q&A, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, please do. I know that this content is often very different from a lot of the messages that we get from our families growing up or from the media. So questions would be very normal and expected. A lot of times people go, what? Like, this is so different from what I've heard before. How can this be true? So if you do have any questions at all, more than happy to have a dialogue or question, or if you're more comfortable to reach out. Like, we do have one.
Yes. Can you see it?
I can. So somebody asked, can you please speak to the difference between body positivity and body neutrality? Absolutely. So body positivity is a movement that says, we ideally want to feel really positively about our bodies, that we want to feel good in our skin. All body shapes and sizes are beautiful, and really promotes like not just being kind of like neutral, but the opposite. Like, I feel really good in my body. Body neutrality speaks to the reality that a lot of us probably aren't going to be able to just talk ourselves into loving our bodies. It's the reality that it's okay to work towards a neutral relationship with your body. And body neutrality really involves that element of respect that I talked about. I don't have to love my body. I don't have to love what my body looks like. But I can make active choices every day to respect it. To say, wow, thank you for helping me carry this child. Thank you for helping me move in this way. So it moves from what can feel like a really unrealistic expectation to feel really positively about ourselves, to working towards, like, I feel neutral and I practice gratitude. And I also want to say that it's really normal for body neutrality to take work too. We live in a culture that doesn't say all bodies are okay. So it can take a lot of work to get to a more neutral place. And I would say it starts with that gratitude and trying to move to a place of respecting our bodies versus just loving it. That was a great question. Any other questions today?
I have one I'll ask while people might be thinking of ones they want to ask. So back to the concept of intuitive eating and like knowing like your hunger scale, like how hungry you feel. I know for a lot of people who have either had an eating disorder or are in the process of recovering from one, that those like holidays where you typically are surrounded by more food and like eat more food than usual can be really hard. What are maybe some suggestions you have for someone in that situation dealing with that sort of pressure, that sort of environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great question. I would encourage them to start with a place of real self-compassion, recognizing that those days are challenging, and they're really challenging in recovery, if you're experiencing an eating disorder. And so yeah, always starting from that place of stopping and recognizing how you're feeling and that this is really challenging and really hard. If you are experiencing an eating disorder, um, and you're lucky enough to have a team, working with your team to create a plan for those days. And what I mean by a team is a therapist, a psychologist, or an eating disorder trained therapist, and ideally an eating disorder specialized dietitian. I also can understand and hold space for the fact that not everybody has that access, which is why we exist at the Alliance. Please reach out. But developing a team going in and working with your team to develop a plan going into those days, because just kind of based on where you're at in your recovery, that can look really different. For some people, it might look like having a meal plan, even for that holiday. For some people, it might look like, getting a trusted friend or family member who's going to be at the meal on your side to support you. And it can be giving yourself, permission that, maybe that meal is going to look different than other meals. And no one meal is going to make or break you and your recovery and your body. So that's some thoughts that I have. Does that answer your question, Maddie?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it was a pretty general question that you could have answered in a lot of different ways. So I wasn't sure if anyone else on this meeting maybe had that same question, but I know that that's something that a lot of people wonder. So yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah, I will say very normal that when we have concerns with food and body, holidays, and those kind of special eating events can be very stressful. So offering yourself kindness, getting a plan together with your team, offering yourself compassion, and just, it's going to depend based on where you're at, but all of those things I think can apply to everybody.
Definitely. I'll throw in another one. Why not? So when you were mentioning like specifically with the regard of social media, the influx of like all these negative presences on social media that have these agendas that are against, body acceptance and intuitive eating and, basically what you just talked about. Are there any like specific people in mind or organizations in mind that you would recommend following on social media to maybe get that source of like good and positive information?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I definitely recommend, always a little biased here, but following us on social media, Alliance for EDA. And off the top of my head, I'm not going to name anyone specifically, but I would say just in general, following accounts that preach a lot of these messages, like the Health at Every Size account. I'll give a specific one. ASDA, which is the Association for Size Diversity and Health, and people that they partner with a lot. Any accounts that are promoting some of these messages that are a bit countercultural and much more accepting of the diversity of body shape and size, of you can trust your body, you can listen to your body. You don't have to have all these outside people telling you what to do. Your body is wiser than you know.
Awesome. And then just as a reminder, yeah, on the screen is their social handles. So if you are looking just for at least one organization, one person to follow, definitely check them out. Their feed is also really aesthetically cute. I enjoy it.
We have a good social media person.
If you care about that kind of stuff, it's a good feed. I work in marketing, so I'm also maybe a little bit biased in that regard, but it's a cute feed.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Pass on your compliment.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions. I guess I'll just kind of give it like a final call if anybody has anything they'd like to ask. If something pops up after the fact, write down their email, follow them on social, ask them questions. Yeah. So
yeah, and as you're talking, my brain is catching up a little bit. For other socials, if you're looking for, I'll go back on my slides to point out a few. So like I said, ASDA is a good one. Association for Size Diversity and Health, Health at Every Size. And then Evelyn Triboli, who's the author of Intuitive Eating, is another wonderful person to follow on social media.
Great. So I don't see any other questions. So I think we're probably good to end it here. I just want to say thank you again, Katie, for doing this program. It was so awesome. I know I definitely learned a lot because intuitive eating, you see that term thrown around so much. So it's good to like really hear a very detailed explanation of what that is and how we can apply it to our lives wherever we're at in our journey with food. Um, and as a reminder, this is just one of the many programs we have for Mental Health Month. Definitely go to the library website, boyntonlibrary.org, to check out our others. And we hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you hopefully on the next program. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.